there's so much mystery that surrounds Sasquatch and stuff, because
Mm-hmm.
even people have had these encounters where they say it's like the sound was turned off in the forest or something like that. Like there's just complete silence, like silence that can be felt, and they're like, what is going on here? And it's just like
Oh
some
man.
people have thought, well, are they like crossing over some sort of dimensional thing, or does everything in the forest just know like the alpha is here and we need to shut up? Like it's just crazy. And then also these orbs have been connected to Sasquatch sightings as well, and so
Mm.
that would kind of be weird for me to connect, like if it was just an experiment gone wrong, just because the orbs are have been connected to a lot of the sightings as well. But just as far as, there's this big creature, how come no one can track it down and stuff like that? But one thing that I have thought is that just like, have you seen, I forget which kind of octopus it is, and if they just even go towards anything, they touch it and then they'd like turn into it and look like it. Do you know which kind of octopus
Oh,
I'm talking about? Have you
I've
seen
seen
those?
what you're talking about, but that's it's
Yeah,
crazy how they can
but
camouflage.
I
Yeah.
think that these the reason why we can't keep track of them is I believe that they might have some sort of capability like that, like where they can cloak themselves in a sense, which sounds crazy, but if you think about what we were talking about, just being able to adapt to your environment, how much, and I don't want this to sound like tree hugger new agey thing, but if we were just less in touch with all our technology, all of social media and everything like that, and just like we were living on the land, and you like, become one with your environment, like would we be able to like tap into something spiritually that we could never do because we're so distracted here? You know what I mean? Because everything, um I feel like a lot of people back then, and we may have talked about this, but I feel like we don't see a lot of like miracles and mass and stuff like that like we used to. And I think it's just because of the Christianity today, and I'm guilty of it too. We get busy with our own lives, but
Hmm.
like how I'm just questioning how much could we tap into this spirit of ours and our connection with God if we weren't surrounded by all the distractions. And so like if these creatures or whatever are in the forest or whatever, they're adapting to their own environment to, for survival or whatever else, because a lot of people, like old Indian stories and stuff like that, they like communicated with these Sasquatch beings, and it's like the Sasquatches would come to their rituals and stuff like that. It's like they're interested in that. It's like something spiritual even with all of that too, which is
Hmm.
kind of crazy to think about.
Well, I do think that our environment obviously can be manipulated by some kind of belief. That's
Mm.
what Jesus basically says. It's like that your faith has healed you. It's
Yeah.
like your faith in me. And I wonder, and I think I was just thinking about that as you were saying that. I was the way I see it too. And I'm like, you really think about it, like that. The apostles didn't have to have a lot of faith after Jesus appeared to them.
Mhm.
No, they knew.
That they knew. It's kind of like that. People were saying. I remember I heard a good quote about David, and they were like, David wasn't brave. He believed, like he knew, like that he was going to kill that giant. You'd be brave if you didn't know. It was like that he obviously, if you to read the account, he was just like this is going to happen.
Mm.
So he wasn't. It wasn't that he was brave. Like he knew it was going to happen. So like in the same way that if the apostles saw Jesus after he was resurrected and they saw him ascend to heaven and everything, if Jesus told you to go do something, you would obviously have no doubt, like to go do it. Like, you know what I mean? If he literally saw the resurrected king and you were like, he said, go do this. And he would say, I want you to go heal that person. You would just go up and you would just know what would happen. I want you to just go cast that demon out of that person. You would just say, get out. Like you would just go because you were just told.
Mm-hmm.
And then like we live in a day and age where it's like that we really have to almost like decalcify our brains in order to like believe like we're really supposed to, because we just don't know.
Yeah.
Like we're walking around, we're seeing everybody else, and like how do we know that this is not the right way? It's difficult to try to like to recapture that. And I think that sometimes I really do think that maybe that is the big lie in like the little season, is that, oh no, you have to wait till all this other stuff's gonna, you have to wait. When what if you realize that the Jesus on the throne right now, like the saints are resurrected ruling, and you have that kind of authority, like right now, like you don't have to wait for that. Like you could go do the things that you're told to do. You could do whatever is necessary. And if you really believe that you could you do it? You know what I'm saying? Like, and you can imagine if that was the different mindset of all the Christians who aren't just waiting, sitting on their hands, waiting for something to happen. When it was like, if we all believe like that, like how different would all this stuff be?
Yeah.
I do wonder that, because I do think it's like I've even thought about it, like that if the devil is written about like in the times of the apostles, that he's the god of this world and he's blinded the eyes of unbelievers. But in the mindset of, if we're in the little season, is he still the god of this world? If Jesus has all authority and he's got control over all the nations, is he still the god? I mean, you could say he's the god to people who worship him,
Mm-hmm.
but is he the god of this world? If you said no, he's not the god. Jesus is king. And we all live like that. Like, because you do think like these bloodsuckers, whether they're physical beings or they're just like the demons, are like energy parasites. Like, like they feed on our fear and our disbelief and our sin. And if we live a different kind of way and a different kind of mindset, I do wonder if like how much a difference would that make? I mean, I believe obviously it would make all the difference in the world. I think this place would be totally different. That everybody walked like they were really, doing something in the name of the king of the universe.
Yeah.
Go do it. And like, yeah, I wonder how much different things could be. And I do think that like maybe those kind of beings, like especially out there, if they are some kind of demonic entity, how much stronger they get when people are freaking out, afraid when they're near.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just like what you're saying, how different would everything be? The first thing that I was thinking of is there would be no need for hospitals. If you got a believing Christian, a group of people, why can't you just go in that hospital and just heal someone of cancer on their deathbed,
Exactly.
and
Mhm.
they get up and walk away? You know what I'm saying? And it's just because like I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
we have this barrier or something. Like we're not connected the way we should be. There's something that's in the way. There's like I guess I don't know, like a barrier is the best way I could explain it, but like we don't have that faith to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
It's kind of
because
like in
if we did, then we should be, and it would give God all kinds of glory. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I wonder, it is kind of almost like in that movie, The Matrix. And I think The Matrix is more of a Gnostic movie, but
Mm-hmm.
it is interesting to think like the way that Neo becomes the one in the movie is like that he's willing to sacrifice himself. So like
Yeah.
he knew that he could save Morpheus if he was willing to die to do it.
Mm.
And then so when he did it, and of course then he didn't die. And then he realized it really was just about him believing he could do it, and that was the difference, and that made him, because it was kind of like, you think I'm gonna be able to dodge bullets? He's like, no, when you're ready, you won't need to.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do think it's like, can you imagine if like that is like the belief that you go into where you like, is like you don't have to doubt, like this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I mean, it's easier. Well, obviously, it's very easy to say. It's way harder to do and actually believe like that. I mean, I'm not saying like that. I'm not being critical of other people. I'm saying like that. I'm just really trying to understand. Is like, is that really what Jesus is? Is that what he's trying to convey to them?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it is, because that's what he's like basically saying. Like that. I think it's always crazy when you think about like that Peter gets out of the boat. He's like, Jesus, call me. It's like, it's funny. Like he knew that he's like he wasn't getting out of the boat without Jesus telling him to get out. So he gets out, and obviously he's the only one who got out of the boat to go walk on the water. And then he starts to sink. And Jesus even says, "Oh, you have little faith." And it's like, for
Mhm.
the rest of us, like, gosh, he got out of the boat though. Like,
Yeah.
like that's
No one
pretty
else did.
hardcore. Yeah, nobody else got out of the boat, but even Jesus, but obviously Jesus is holding him to a standard like that, obviously, because he's pushing him to the level where he's going to do all the things he's going to do later. But it's kind of crazy to think like that we could do things like that if we only believed. But yeah, at the same time, I guess it's harder for us because we have not seen like that.
Mm-mm.
And this is what we've known. And I think that I do pray that obviously that's I know that God knows that we're only getting this because we're reading and we're like, wow, is that what we're supposed to be doing? And like, we're still trying to figure this out.
Yeah, and I was gonna make a comment too, and it kind of goes with the whole like deception, little season thing, and kind of going back to what we were previously talking about, just what are we supposed to do, and just about our closeness with God and stuff. But I was listening to your episode like a couple weeks ago, probably, with that girl. She used to be like a new ager or
Oh,
like
okay,
some sort of,
Angela.
yeah. And so this is what gets me, because I was talking about like us doing miracles and stuff like that, and like, do we not have enough faith or whatever? Because like you can get people like Angela who is in that deep, and a lot of these people, they're communicating with something else, and
Mm-hmm.
they're literally, it's like they have power like to manipulate this reality or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, just to kind
Mm-hmm.
of make people do certain things and not do certain things or whatever. You know what I'm kind of talking about.
Yeah.
but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
but just the same, like on the opposite side of that spectrum, people who actually believe in God and in Jesus and stuff like that, they may not have the same, I guess, if you want to call it, success when trying to connect with God and stuff. And I've always wondered why the enemy is so willing to show himself and to almost like flex his muscles, but sometimes God doesn't work that way, in our own lives, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, yeah, it makes sense. I've thought that same thing, like a bunch of. I've wondered about that a lot. I don't have any answers. I've also wondered why, if we're really in the year 2024, which I don't believe we are, why have there been no new prophets? Why hasn't there been a single prophet in 2,000 years?
Mm-hmm.
If we're still waiting on the return of Christ, why hasn't not sent any prophets? No new books, no new scriptures have been written. It's
Well,
strange.
Greg Locke is now an apostle, so
The 13th.
you have
Yeah,
guys like Kenneth Copeland, and
Yeah.
no, yeah, I
yeah,
mean, we joke, but no, that's true. I've said the same thing, because you think about like if the prophets were reinforcing basically the interesting part is like, so you have the Torah, you have where Moses is given these prophecies that are going to happen, and obviously he's already prophesying about Babylon before they even get into the land. I mean, it's kind of insane. I said that's how that's how a lot of people, you should know that the Bible's true, is because if you only wrote 5 books, right? So these are the first 5 books. It's not really a happy ending, is it? It's like they do get the land, but literally Moses is prophesying. God's telling him to say, they are going to rebel, and I am going to take this land from them. And so what the prophets have did from there, they basically repeat the same prophecy Moses is telling them. So it's like, it's interesting, like when Jeremiah is prophesying about the captivity, and Hananiah is like saying, "Oh no, it's not going to be like that. Things are going to be good." And Jeremiah is saying, if that's true, praise God. But just so you know, you've prophesied different than all the other prophets. And so, like the same way that, why wouldn't it be the same way that if these prophecies were still to come about this coming tribulation, why wouldn't God continue to be sending his prophets to
Yeah.
reinforce the upcoming tribulation that's coming?
Exactly.
Because it already happened.
It already came.
Because
Yeah.
that's I think that's the only thing that really makes any sense. It's like the prophecies about like this different part of the world that is related to this very specific part of this world in the Bible. The more you read it, it's like it is pretty comical when people say, you know what? I remember people saying this a long time ago, you know, America's not mentioned in the Bible. It's almost like that we are so like self-centered, where it's like, what? How could it not be? You know what I mean? Like, have you ever thought like, I mean, I know that
Yeah.
lots of us probably the first time we heard that, the America's not mentioned. You know that? It's almost like that. I remember when that was first told to me, it was almost like that America's going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why this would not be mentioned in the Bible. Here's another option, because this was not written in the times of America. This was written well before America, and this was written to this specific part of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes way more sense with that mindset. And you don't have to add all these weird things, these caveats about what this could mean. What could this mean in 2024? Nah, I mean, it's all straightforward right there. And it's like, gosh, it makes perfect sense. I can really do have to wonder like that so much of this stuff, and you know, I do feel like I cut us a little bit of slack, like because we were told a certain way, but when you see it, gosh, it's like so clear that this is written to them. The 70 weeks of Daniel is all related to the times of Jesus. The apostles know when he says he's coming back in their lifetimes. That's why they keep repeating that it's going to be now. In the book of Hebrews, what he said, the beginning of Hebrews starts out with, you know, there was a time where God spoke to his people through his prophets, but here in the last days, he spoke to us through his son. And then the same thing in James, I know he literally says in the last days, even like with Timothy, when 2 times Paul tells him, you know, the Spirit says in the last days that there's going to be doctrines of devils. And then he says later to him, he says, in the last days, people are going to be this. They're going to be this. They're going to be ungrateful. They're going to, you know, be rebellious. They're going to be idolatrous. And he's like, have nothing to do with these people. It's almost like that. Okay, so in the last days, people are going to be like this. Don't have anything to do with those people, Timothy.
Yeah.
Okay, because he's talking to them. He's talking to Timothy that they're living in the last days. It's like, you know, it really is like a smack yourself on the head. You're like, how did I never see this like in the same light before?
Yeah. And I was talking to Daniel Collier. You had him on your show a while back, and I had brought up that verse in Thessalonians where it's talking about this man of sin, the son of perdition, and it's talking about that spirit of Antichrist or something like that. And it's basically saying that it's already at work, like right now, and he's talking about it like in the present. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well,
And
I
so
started to wonder. I thought like when people say who's the Antichrist, and the interesting thing about the book of Revelation, it never mentions the Antichrist.
No.
It mentions a beast. It mentions the Apollyon, who would be referred to as the destroyer. Even Nebuchadnezzar is called the destroyer, you know, in the times of like the first captivity. I think that what it was is I think that you had this spirit, this demonic spirit that came out of this pit, and it possessed the kings of Rome. And so like whatever, you know, like so there's not necessarily a specific Antichrist. The spirit of Antichrist is at work.
Yeah.
So the spirit of Antichrist is possessing these men, and then they are going to be the destroyer for God. God is going to use these men to destroy the whore during this thing. And it's like, that makes a lot of sense. I even thought about like in Thessalonians too, when he's saying like that, when he's saying like, you're not going to miss the day of the Lord because these things have to come first. And the first thing he mentions is the rebellion. Well, I know it says, I think, apostasy in the King James, but in the ESV it says the rebellion. And I started to think about it. So what if the rebellion they're talking about is like the Jews rebelled against the Romans? You know, and so then even says later that there's this strong delusion that's going to come over them. And I remember when we talked about the works of Josephus, when he's saying like that these people really thought they were going to be saved. like fighting against the Romans, like because they believed in these same prophecies that led up to the 70 weeks. They knew the timeline. I think that's also probably why Jesus had no time for these people, because like they would have known the prophecy for Daniel. They would have known the 70 weeks. They knew to expect a Messiah. And then so when they were rejecting him, it was kind of like, well, you're not the one we want. We want something that we want the earthly king who's going to conquer these Romans. So we don't want you. And so to me, it makes sense like that if there's strong delusion, and so you have this rebellion, then you have this strong delusion, and the delusion is literally forcing these Jews to fight so hard against these Romans where they're literally going to be destroyed, because it's kind of like that the Romans, obviously, if they could, because they obviously were control of this whole territory, it was like of no advantage to them to destroy a place completely like they did. Especially like a city like Jerusalem would have had this historic city, this historic temple. Why would they want to rule over ashes?
Yeah, they could have.
I don't think they would have.
It.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like the Romans didn't go in just to destroy people and then just burn places down. They were trying to rule the world. They weren't trying to just destroy places. So like, yeah. So the fact that they did that, it was only because it was like, yeah, the unstoppable force versus the unmovable object, and like, so they're going till the end, till it literally ended in like the worst time ever. You know, the worst time the world's ever seen. And I think, like, you know what, that, I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. I forgot. I just read it again. I know Paul was saying something about, I think he was even saying, like, maybe it was, I forgot which book it was. It was basically saying, like, that the Jews were kind of in tribulation when he was talking. It was like, it must have been like probably close to the end of his life, because he was saying like that God's wrath is already happening to them. I have to look that up. I'll figure out where that is. I'll have to find that for you guys.
Yeah, I'm not quite remembering where that is, but
I kind of remember reading that though. I know what he's talking about, where he basically was saying that even now we're in, tribulation, something like that.
Yeah, it was something similar to that. I was actually really surprised that I said like that again. If you're not looking for these things, I guess this is how you can miss them.
Yeah. Well, Revelations, and like, was it one of the first chapter? I know it's one of the first 3 chapters where he says that to that one church that they are in tribulation, doesn't he? I don't know how he words it. You see, yeah, I know thy tribulation and thy works and all this. So he said, I know you're in tribulation. Be faithful until I come, and you'll get a crown of life. Endure till the end. And he was telling them that, the end is near. It's at the doors. It's now.
I'll have to find another time. Yeah. I want to bring this up before I forget about it though. To go all the way back to the cryptids and the weird stuff underground, and even the camouflaged monsters. This movie is going to actually, like I said, I wish I'd have brought it up right when we talked about it, but we changed gears into a much better topic, so I couldn't bring it up then. Yeah. All right. The movie Monsters, Inc. Just think about this movie. So as we were talking about all the weird stuff about, like, for one, Bigfoots. So the main kind of monster in that is that thing, was it John Goodman, Sully? What does he look like?
Sasquatch.
He looks like a Bigfoot. He's got horns. Then you have the one guy, Randall. He's like the chameleon guy, and he literally changes. He can obviously adapt to whatever environment he's in. And like literally in the movie, they're in this other place, and they use these doorways to enter into our world. And what they do when they get here is they scare people and collect energy for their city that's some other place.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like exactly what we were talking about. Like if you think about it, like in the movie, obviously it's like some alternate dimension, which I guess it could be if these are spiritual beings. But what if they're not? If they weren't spiritual beings and they were literally just physical beings, that alternate dimension could literally just be inside the earth, and they have access points to our realm
Well,
via the
the door analogy there is crazy as well, because isn't that what we all say, like, don't open up any doors for this or that, you know what I mean? Like, if you do a certain thing, you might open up doors that you know what I mean? It's just that door
Mhm.
analogy where it's like, you know, to another place that this other thing comes from, you know what I'm saying, that you don't want.
Well, it's interesting too in that in the like the Lord of the Rings movies, you have the very first one, they want the dwarf wants them to go in the mines of Moria, which interestingly enough, Mount Moria is where the temple was,
Mm,
in
Oh man.
in Jerusalem. Yeah. So I wondered, like Tolkien, I'm sure he probably was. He was thinking some kind of Templar thing. So like the dwarves tunneled into this mountain, and of course in the movie, like they go down into these things, and there's like these epic stone creations. It's literally a city under the ground, and of course, like in the main dwarf's mind, it's like there's this great place down there. It's like epic. There's gonna be parties. They're gonna be drinking ale and eating meat right off the bone. But then when they go down there, they're all dead. All the goblins and whatever killed them. And then I think what the one wizard is like, I'm like telepathically talking to Gandalf, and he's saying, what they found. They dug too deep, and when they dug too deep, they unleashed that kind of like that shadow and
mm,
fire demon thing.
yeah.
What if it's like that? What if it is? What if these people did dig too deep, and that's the kind of stuff that yeah, that's the doors they opened to
Mm.
different dimensions. And even when you were saying there's orbs, I think it's interesting, like if you watch like the Peter Pan movie, right? When Tinkerbell is first shown in these movies, like before you realize it's a little kind of like cute little girl with wings, she's just shown as an orb.
Yeah,
She just
Yeah.
shows up as this little ball of light, and then when she lands,
that's
then you can
true.
see what she is. But it's like, but she's shown as an orb. So I've often wondered, it's like, what if that is just those things literally are just this, like that's what they're showing you. That's a fairy.
Yeah.
It's like, but we just see it as a ball of light.
It could be. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times these orbs that people are seeing too, it's like they're sentient too. It's not like this random thing. Like they can actually interact with
Yep.
this orb, so it has some sort of intelligence too. So it's almost like what you're saying, another being or something that's not within our current reality that we accept. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's obviously things out there that are being withheld from us, and disclosure hasn't happened despite all the eyewitness testimonies.
Of
Have you
course, in that
guys?
movie too, you have the Tinkerbell is kind of like the scout that goes before Peter Pan. So Peter Pan is the one who ends up kidnapping the kids, or taking them on a fun adventure, or whatever you say. But like,
Mm.
Tinkerbell is kind of like the one who goes spies it out, and then later Peter Pan comes afterwards. So maybe that's the same way you were saying, like that when you have these kind of cryptid encounters, there's the orbs first, and then you have the being afterwards.